Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So today I'm going to talk about the destruction of the liberal world order and what it means for our stories and our entertainment. Because quite honestly, there is a meaningful connection between those two things. But before I get there, I just want to let everyone know that there's a new link in my description and my pinned comment for the sign-up page for my next book, which is called Fade to Blue. It is a melding of film noir with Indiana Jones. If you go over to the page and leave your email address, you will be informed via email by me when the project goes live. And this is the first material that I will have published that will be available digitally. There are also 2 links for my 3 graphic novels, 2 superhero graphic novels and 1 return to form for low fantasy. You're looking at some of the beautiful art from, well, mainly Fade to Blue in the background, but a few stills of the others as well. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and take a closer look at some of my projects, see if they're for you. But back to our topic. Now, I plan to do this video for several weeks. It is tied in loosely to the videos I've been making over the last couple of weeks. But the last couple of weeks I've been focusing on more how we need to move into conservative entertainment rather than liberal entertainment and how you can distinguish between the two. But I think I was a little bit too close to the subject, not being able to see the forest for the trees. Let's back up and look at the entire forest first and see what is going on. And in the end, see why, in my humble opinion, the new surge in good entertainment is going to be focused around the heroic. Now, the short answer to why it will be is because the basic rule, if you look at stories over time throughout history, of why stories really become popular, it's because the author is tapping into something that is missing in the lives of the everyday people who are going to be reading the story. Something they feel should be there, but is missing in their lives. And that most definitely right now is the idea of a hero. Now, I'm probably going to spend the majority of this video talking about the how and why that actually is missing within your lives, why it is tied into the idea of the liberal world order. I will try my best to give examples of these political ideas through story, but we will not get to the heroic part until everything is tied together at the end. Also, before I begin, I just want to say, I had, again, planned to do this video for several weeks, and it seems like things have just come straight to a head. Over this last week, I've watched at least 4 videos from people saying the exact same thing as concerns what they're concentrating on in their videos. I want to give a shout out right off the bat to Carl Benjamin over at the Lotus Eaters. He did 2 videos this last week. Well, came out this last week. One on his Sargon channel and one on his Lotus Eaters channel that dealt with different aspects of the root causes of this entire thing. Academic Agent did another one. There was a fellow who I'm subscribed to who does analysis of body language of famous people or people in the news, and he was talking about the same thing. Everybody seems to be recognizing this is what is going on right now. You see around you the destruction of the liberal world order. Now, some people might call it a different thing. Some might call it simply the hangover of ideas from the Second World War. Some people might call it the boomer generation mentality, but they're all basically the same thing, or at the very least can be tied to the same origin. So I'll give you a definition, not my definition, of the liberal international order, sometimes called the liberal world order, and I'll go to Wikipedia just because it's an open source. I know it's heavily left-leaning, but it's an open source, one that doesn't shy away from its liberal origins, so at the very least on this topic, I can assume they're being fairly open and honest. And the first paragraph, which is the only thing I'm going to read, gives you a basic definition and layout of the entire thing. It says, in international relations, the liberal international order, also known as rules-based order, describes a set of global, rule-based, structured relationships based on political liberalism, economic liberalism, and liberal internationalism since the late 1940s. More specifically, it entails international cooperation through multilateral institutions like the United Nations, World Trade Organization, and International Monetary Fund, and is constituted by human equality, in brackets, freedom, rule of law, and human rights, close brackets, open markets, security, cooperation, promotion of liberal democracy, and monetary cooperation. The order was established in the aftermath of World War II, led in large part by the United States. That's a fairly good and brief summary of what the liberal world order is all about. And it is a fairly good description of what is now coming crashing down around the ears of our entire civilization. Now, where does it come from? What are the origins? What are the roots of this entire thing? Well, let's look at that only very briefly, but touch on it. Everything goes back to World War II. It is, if you're referencing this kind of order within your country, within your world, a mindset where history stops in 1938. And this is why we can tie it into the boomer mentality. Why? Because it is the boomers and their ideas, quite honestly, described best as the age of Aquarius, wherein the end of World War II signaled an entire birth of a new world where they were the ones in charge. Now, again, what are the roots of this kind of mentality? Well, I would say one of the deepest roots for this kind of mentality is critical theory. Critical theorists came together in about 1962 to establish a more codified version of what they were doing, since at the very least the 30s. The critical theorists were avowed communists and were looking for a new way to reignite the grand communist global revolution, because they basically sat back and said the workers' revolution, which Marx had mused about, simply is not coming about or coming about fast enough. And two of the key figures for this critical theory movement were two men who I speak about every once in a while on this channel, called Horkheimer and Adorno. And they wrote a book called The Dialectic of Enlightenment. And it is so pivotal in what I talk about because what it does is it takes stories and it applies the communist mentality to those stories to show how history unfolds. Now, when they talk about story, they focus mainly on the Odyssey. There are other stories that they mention and bring into the discussion, but they focus mainly on it. And I point that out for very specific reasons that will become evident in a few minutes. However, their analysis and their analysis of history is one of a Marxist bent because they are avowed Marxists, communists, and they talk about the end of history. And in their definition of this entire thing, they talk about how historical events and ideas dovetail with each other to produce something new, almost in a Hegelian dialectic kind of way. These two ideas, these two historical events, will dovetail and produce an offspring which is a hybrid of the two. But when that happens, those old ideas become irrelevant. They will never, ever be able to be repeated within history. They are, as they say, placed behind a wall of the unrepeatable. And this is, of course, how you proceed in a progressive way towards the end of history. But the important point is this mentality that there is a wall wherein when things pass through where this wall is, they can never return. And they're talking about it in terms of story as it regards history. And the thing is, Horkheimer and Adorno were not making this as a new claim, a new way of thinking. No, this idea had been percolating within Western civilization from the beginning of the 1900s. And it is the mindset that grasped on to the boomers. It is the mindset of the age of Aquarius. It is the mindset that we have now passed beyond where this immensely destructive conflict can ever occur again within world history. And that, of course, makes the boomers the new high priests, as it were, of culture, because they are the only enlightened ones. Anyone else who was born before that, they just have old ideas. Those ideas are no longer relevant. Now, personally, as a writer, it wasn't until I got rid of this mindset within myself that I actually saw my writing get to a stage where I thought other people could read it. I was always writing stories growing up in high school and university. They were never any good. It wasn't until I realized that this quote-unquote progressive mentality, this idea of a bar of us going backwards towards history was complete nonsense, that my writing actually took off. My novel manuscript, which I still have hidden away and hope to publish someday in some form, is a story set in the future, which looks quite definitely like the past. And on that note, I am not one who likes to praise the works of Dune or Frank Herbert. Quite honestly, I do not. But he did get something right, which I think almost everyone else around him got wrong. And that is the fact that when we colonize space, it will look more like the Middle Ages than it will look like Star Trek. Anyways, this boomer mentality that history stops at World War II and nothing prior to the end of World War II can ever repeat itself is the basis for the liberal world order, is the basis for the mentality of politics since then, and is the basis of killing the idea of hero and true heroism that we desperately want to get back to. And again, quite honestly, I have been thinking about this for a long time because the people around me, oh, by the way, when I was in school, grade school, high school, when Memorial Day, Veterans Day came along, we always had someone, a soldier, come in from World War II, someone who fought in World War II, and give us his take on what it was like. You could not escape listening to the horrors of World War II firsthand, but I was always surprised about what most of the people around me took away from that. And when they would say slogans like "never again," which, depending on where you are in the world, is a common slogan around Memorial Day, around Veterans Day, most people around me took it to be a statement of fact rather than prescriptive, which is to say, I think the correct way of looking at that slogan would be, we should try our best, do everything we can to make sure that such horrors do not emerge within the world ever again. But the way that most people around me took it was the fact that, no, we've moved past this. It will never happen again. We have almost, in a sense, evolved beyond possibly destroying our entire civilization in this bloody, horrific way. And again, I looked around at people around me and go, what? I even wrote a paper, and this was in creative writing in high school, about how this kind of mentality was dead wrong. And although it was laudable that, yes, we should say never again in order to try to ensure that the world never goes through a world war, it's going to happen eventually. It's not placed behind a wall of the unrepeatable. Wars are going to happen. And again, quite honestly, especially when I was in history class, people would look at me like I had two heads when I said that. But let's move on to why this liberal world order emerged from this kind of mentality and what it was supposed to do, what it was designed to do. Well, it was designed to ensure that, again, an event like World War II would never occur again. But what was the intended way in which it was supposed to operate in order to do such a thing? Well, Carl was right in one of his videos where he talks about the fact that the works of Fukuyama actually lay this out quite bare. It is the idea of taking politics and making it into political science, which is opposed to the political system which he describes as having a thematic spirit, which I always equate with the Odyssey and the story of Odysseus, because he is prompted by the thumos, the courage rising in his chest in order to do what he must do. And it is in some sense that this thematic spirit makes Odysseus a great man and a great leader. But anyway, back to this idea of political science. And just briefly, my first undergraduate degree was in history. My second was in political science. And I was part of this debate within the graduate work that I did because the department head at the university where I was working on changing the definition, the title of the department to political studies, because political science was not an accurate description of what we should be studying. But anyway, the idea of political science that comes out of the liberal world order is the idea that you can reduce politics simply to scientific variables. The idea, basically, that you can strain all humanity out of it and simply have rules-based order, which again is what they talk about within that definition I read you from Wikipedia, rules-based order that has nothing to do with the humanity that it is meant to rule. How does that work? Well, I think of the movie Elysium when I think about such a thing, wherein computers and robots really control the infrastructure, and there's no arguing with them. They have set parameters wherein they will allow certain things and not allow others, and that's it. They're robotic. There's no soul, there's no humanity. It's just robotic rules. Micromanaged robotic rules, by the way. And the thing is, this kind of a mentality, which is the mentality that is supposed to support the rules-based order of the liberal international world order, is one that is quite definitely contrary to what I'm always talking about, which is the origins of Western civilization. And again, as I'm always saying, what do we go back to when we want to look at the focal point of how Western civilization became a thing in itself, how it peeled itself off from the rest of the surrounding civilization? Well, it is two stories. They are from the two parents of Western civilization. One is the story of Job, and the other is the story of Orestes. And so as not to repeat that argument, because I've done that a number of times in my videos, the basic concept is from these two origins came the idea that intent matters. That is the focal point which began the long journey of Western civilization becoming a thing in itself. Intent matters. But the problem with this rules-based order, where everything is micromanaged down to a disimpassioned scientific way, means that your intent does not matter. Again, think about that movie Elysium if you've ever seen it. The fellow is looking for some medical attention, I think, for his daughter. And he comes up against a robot, and the robot is simply not giving him anything that he needs. And so he gets frustrated, he gets angry. And so, if I remember correctly, police robots are deployed to stop him because he can't make any kind of argument to a computer. He can't make any kind of argument to a robot. Why not? Because his argument is human. His intent is to do something noble, which is to save his little girl's life. Again, if I remember that movie correctly. But arguing such a point of your intent with the robotic is not going to do anything. And it doesn't take a leap in logic now to see how these micromanaged rules to instill order disregard the intent of people. Once again, it's based around order. So, of course, we will ignore the intent of this group of people because it brings more order, even if they do something wrong. And we will ignore the intent of that other group of people, even though it might be right, because what they're asking for does not bring more order. It doesn't matter what the intent is, good or bad. It simply matters what mathematical equation of order can we bring to bear on this situation in order to keep things moving in the direction of non-conflict. Because once again, conflict is the enemy. Conflict is what led to World War II. And if you're looking around you, looking at the news around you and wondering why things like free speech are dying in the United Kingdom, where there is an almost totalitarian crackdown on what people can say, it's all because of this micromanaged idea of the liberal world order, where order is the rule of the day, and where indeed your intent does not matter, which again is offensive to the very origins of Western civilization. And this destruction of the idea of intent leads into two other things which I commonly talk about, which is the switching of our civilization from a guilt culture to a shame culture, and at the same time, virtue signaling, because the two are linked hand in hand. Because in the traditional way of viewing humanity in Western civilization, intent does matter, which means what happens internally to you does matter, and how you order yourself does matter. And that's why we have a primarily guilt-based society, which is to say, I see these rules, which should, by the way, emerge from reality in a natural law way, that is the basis of America, who is really the head of this entire conflict. But yes, you take those external rules and you internalize them for yourself, by yourself, in order to order yourself. That's what a guilt system does. And if you do something wrong, you point your finger at yourself and say, yeah, I did something wrong. I can feel it. I know it. And I'm going to have to rectify my own actions. But within a shame culture, you don't have to internalize any rules. The rules are all external. External in this, once again, scientific, micromanaged way, according to this liberal world order. You are shamed if you're caught, because those rules are only applicable to what you do. Again, intent doesn't matter. To what you do. You will be shamed into submission. And by extension, in such a world where you are governed by shame, you don't have to actually have virtue, you just have to virtue signal. You just have to look like you're doing the proper thing. You just have to look like you're the one who has the high moral ground. And virtue signaling is one of the staples of current storytelling, in more ways than one. Because the other system, the guilt system, which is the proper system for the government of Western civilization, is a guilt culture-based civilization, where you order and reorder yourself internally according to what is right and wrong. And how do you do that? Well, you do that through virtue, not through virtue signaling. Now, I just want to leave that thread dangling there for a minute, because I'll come right back to it. But the other part of this entire thing, this entire mindset of micromanaged political science, wherein you can, in a disimpassioned, equation-based way, determine what people should do and how their lives are going to be governed, which pays no mind to the humanity within each person. That also leads into the way that we're governed, of course, with our laws in each of our respective countries, but also in the way that we think. Also in the way that we are shown a portrayal of how to move forward. And once again, it's based upon this idea of cutting off all of history before 1938 as something unrepeatable. That, by the way, defeats the entire purpose of studying history. The idea of history is that mankind's nature is fixed. And so, yes, history is going to repeat itself. So the best way to stave off poor results within your actions, within the actions of your society, your culture, is to look at history and say, okay, these people did it wrong back then. Let's not do that again, because we'll get the same results. Because we're the same people that they are. We have the same nature. If we do the same thing, we're going to get the same results. So we study history in order to ensure that people are aware that that is the result you're going to get if you do X, Y, and Z. But again, if you have the mentality that all history is cut off beyond a certain point, which again, for the liberal world order is at the very minimum the end of World War II, if not the first of World War II, then there is no reason to study history. And moreover, if you have this kind of mentality where you have this new man with new knowledge, which can never go back to those barbaric times of World War II, and this new man that is to lead the government and rule over the people is a robotic, scientific-based minded person who micromanages things without entering the humanity of things like intent into the equation, then what are you going to get? when you get politicians. We are simply going to get computer programs that run in a very specific way. They never deviate from that. They have no soul, and they also have no compassion. Whereas when I was studying history, again, first degree was in history, and even then it was still in the old world way of looking at it, it was the history of great men and great events as they were determined by great men. That kind of history is gone. I have a young friend who a couple of years ago thought he would take history in university and started to take it because he, like me, was enthralled by the story of the great events and men of history, and he got into university history and went, this is ridiculous. What they're teaching is ridiculous. There is no great men. There is no great events. It's a different form of the micromanaged scientific analysis of the basic things that people would do and what they would eat and all this kind of stuff. History is no longer history as a subject. But I'm getting off topic. How do we combine those two ideas, the one of the great men of history and the idea of virtue that I was talking about? Well, first of all, let's look at why this entire thing is being destroyed. Why this liberal world order is being destroyed. Quite honestly, it's because of Donald Trump. I suppose it would be in part by Putin as well, the Russian president, because they're both two sides of the same coin. They might be opposed to each other in certain ways, but they're both looking for the same thing. They're both looking to be great men of history. Quite honestly, that's not surprising given Russian history, but anyway. Now, laying aside whether or not either of these individuals are virtuous, let's simply look at that and realize that Donald Trump is, at the moment I'm speaking, taking a sledgehammer to the liberal world order. Why? Because the basis of why he was elected was make America great again. It's not the idea that we're all going to become some amorphous international order wherein we're all micromanaged by these disimpassioned scientific rules. No, it's that America and Americans have an exceptional spirit, and they can leverage that exceptional spirit through personal choice, through accountability, through exceptional actions to prove themselves to be a great country and great people. And so can their leader. But greatness comes from internal order, the order of the individual inside. The greatness that people are striving for is the greatness of virtue, which is no surprise because one of the ancient definitions of virtue is the ability to accomplish one's ends. Another is to be in full height of your potential. The example I usually use is an apple tree that is fully grown and is laden down with fruit. As it is then, in the full accomplishment of its nature, it is said to be in its virtue. This is what people wish to get back to. This is what is missing in the lives of individuals. Accountability for themselves, that they can become great. Even the notion that they have the ability to become great, instead of you're just a cog in a machine. What you do doesn't matter. Your intent doesn't matter. Whether or not you're a good person internally doesn't matter. Whether or not you order yourself according to the virtues does not matter according to the liberal world order. You're just another part of a mechanical process which is governed by, quite simply, the rules, scientific and mathematical, of how cogs within this machine work. And under such a mindset, to bring it all to its head as concerns story, is it any wonder that the stories pushed on us for decade after decade now are simply committee-driven, research-driven compilations of simple, and at this point, tired tropes? Because under the liberal world order mindset, all they need to do is find the right equation to micromanage how a story is constructed in order to get you to watch it. There is no humanity there. There is no soul there. There is no inspiration there. There is no virtue there. And quite certainly, there is no individuality there. And quite honestly, it is almost monumentally funny that the Marvel movie that has come out over the last few weeks is the new Captain America movie. Captain America Brave New World, which used to be called, before they got a lot of backlash for it, Captain America New World Order. It's a story written by committee, which, as most people would admit, is simply a cobbling together of so many other things from so many other Marvel movies and properties. It has no soul of its own, and even the quote-unquote hero in this story is assuming the borrowed, if not stolen, valor of the man who the story is supposed to be about, Captain America, Steve Rogers. Why? Because there is no real spirit behind the idea of Captain America, or even as the fellow who plays this new Captain America Falcon said within one interview, there is no direct American spirit that Captain America is supposed to embody. No. Those are archaic ideas of virtue, heroism, greatness. No, it's just a mantle. He's just been switched out like a cog in a machine. The old cog has worn thin. Replace it with a new one. It will work the same way. And this is what Marvel Comics has been trying to do for a minimum of 15 years now. But audiences are finally saying no, no, no. We strive for greatness in ourselves, and we can recognize greatness in others. And what you are portraying for us on the screen is not greatness. It is a lifeless, soulless manipulation of the audience in order to provoke them to feel certain things, in order for them to give up their money. And that's why I placed all of my money on betting on the horse of heroism as being the staple of entertainment and stories that is going to burst out of our society in the very near future. It is because, as a civilization, we are sick and tired of being viewed, either as a country or as individuals, as cogs in a machine. We are sick and tired of having our intent, our humanity, our virtue trampled on by the people in control. Because the people in control have been so soulless that they are willing, quite honestly, to sit and watch the destruction of their own selves and their own countries around them and not even care. But a hero does care. A hero has pathos. A hero does struggle with virtue. A hero becomes a great man. From Odysseus, when the thumos, the courage, rises in his chest, to the Captain America that you remember on your lunchbox, on your television screen, in your comic books, inspiring you to be a better person. History, once again, belongs to the great men. Once again, belongs to those who will shape and mold themselves from the inside out into something truly exceptional. And that's why our stories are going to bend once again towards true heroes, because they will be our sure companion on this road to the greatness that we are built for. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. And don't forget, the link for the sign-up page for my new story, Fade to Blue, is in the description and the pinned comment. Go on over there and leave your email so that I will contact you as soon as the project goes live. And of course, there are 2 links for my other 3 graphic novels there as well. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.